Hello everyone and welcome to the Hockey Hub. So today we're going to be taking a look at the top 15 free agents that are still available on the market and trying to find a landing spot for them. Now, these rankings of the top 15 free agents is my opinion, so obviously some of you guys might think that a certain player is better than one another, but it doesn't really matter for this video. We're just talking about who the top 15 are and finding a spot for them to play in next season. So we're going to start off at 15 and work our way up to 1. And number 15 we have Craig Anderson. And I would have him going to the Anaheim Ducks. Now, Anaheim, obviously, they've got John Gibson, he's a great goalie, but they don't really have a backup right now. I think Anderson would be a good mentor in Anaheim, obviously a former great American goalie bringing along another younger American goalie. Obviously, Gibson isn't super young, he's 26, but you know, he's not obviously as experienced as Craig Anderson. I think that would be a good fit, especially since who knows what's going to happen with Ryan Miller. So I think that Craig Anderson would be a good fit in Anaheim. So then moving on to number 14, we've got Derek Brassard. Now I have him going back to the New York Rangers. Now I think that this would obviously be an interesting story because he used to play in New York, then he got traded to Ottawa. But I think Brassard going to the Rangers would give them some center depth, which is kind of the area of weakness in their lineup, aside from their left side of the defense, which is kind of brutal. Obviously the Rangers have got fantastic wingers, but not... aside from Zibanejad, I mean, Strome played well, but can he bring that level of play again? There's Philip Hedl, Barrett Howden, sorry. So there's a lot of question marks there, and I think Brassard would be a good insurance option for the New York Rangers. Now moving on to number 13, I have Matt Martin. Now, Matt Martin, I think, should go back to the Islanders. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. I think everybody's pretty sure it's going to happen. There's rumored to have a deal in place. They're just waiting to get Matthew Barzal signed and move out some money. So that's an obvious fit. Martin has played in the Island for most of his career. Obviously, he had a stint in Toronto. But his best fit is the Islanders. And yeah, that's all that needs to be said about that one. At number 12, I have Corey Perry. And I actually have him going to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, I'm not a big fan of Corey Perry, to be honest. He obviously plays a very agitating game. He can be a dirty player, and is a player that, while in his prime was good, he's definitely out of his prime now. But I think Montreal would be an interesting fit for him because Montreal is obviously a younger team, and while they do have lots of forward depth on the wings, they probably need to move out a guy like Paul Byron or maybe Yoel Armia. So bringing in Perry as a good, probably on a $700K contract, would be a good insurance option, would be a good fourth liner, and provide some of that grit that Montreal was really trying to acquire this offseason, and they did with Joel Edmondson and Josh Anderson. But Perry would add more grit, and it would add a lot of veteran playoff experience as well. So I think Perry would be a good fit in Montreal. Now moving on to number 11, I have Andreas Athanasiou, and I have him going to the Ottawa Senators. Now, to me, Ottawa seems like an ideal fit for Athanasiou. Ottawa has, been a place for some younger players that have struggled to turn their careers around of late. Look at Anthony Duclair. I think Athanasiou would play there with little pressure and could potentially have a bounce back to form and be another 20 or maybe even 30 goal scorer again. I think it's a great fit in Ottawa, and Pierre Dorion should really look into it. Then at number 10, I have Zdeno Chara. And he needs to go back to Boston. It makes sense. He's been a Bruin for what feels like forever. He's their captain. And Boston's defense isn't looking that good after the departure of Torrey Krug. So actually having Chara there would still be of great benefit to them. So, I definitely have Chara going back to Boston. At number 9, I have Conor Sheary. Now, I would have Conor Sheary going to the San Jose Sharks. That was a rumor from a few weeks ago that he might actually be going to the Sharks, and I think that does make sense because obviously the Sharks' winger depth isn't that great. They do need some forwards, they do need some scoring, and Sheary can bring that in a third-line role, so I think that's a good fit. Obviously, he was back in Pittsburgh for a while, and he could return again, maybe play on Crosby's wing, boost up his numbers, but I think San Jose would be a good fit for Conor Sheary. At number 8, I have Carl Soderberg. Now, I think Carl Soderberg would be a good fit for the Florida Panthers. Now, obviously, Florida their center depth isn't necessarily the best behind Barkov. There is questions about who will play the 2C there. Maybe that will end up being Alexander Wenberg, who they also signed in free agency. But I look at the roster on paper, and I really think they need some centers. Soderberg is an underrated player. He puts up decent offensive numbers in Arizona, which obviously they're no offensive team. So I think Soderberg would be a good under-the-radar acquisition for the Florida Panthers. Now, moving on to number 7, I have Erik Halla going back to the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Vegas is another team that obviously they're a cup contender, they've got a great roster, but the center spot is a question. There's William Karlsson, but Paul Stastny just left, and Chandler Stevenson has looked okay, but can he come into his own and fill out that second line center spot? There's also Cody Glass, their former 4th overall pick, but there's questions about whether or not he's ready or if he's going to develop into the player they drafted him to be. So I think Halla going back to Vegas, where he had his best career years before his injury, would be a good fit for both the player and the team, and he would definitely be welcomed back by the locker room, since apparently there has been rumblings that the locker room is unhappy with how some of the players from that original core that went to the Stanley Cup final have been treated. At number 6, I have Ilya Kovalchuk going to the Boston Bruins. Now, obviously, Kovalchuk was a player that was rumored to return to Montreal in the offseason, but after signing Tyler Toffoli and adding Josh Anderson, I really don't see a fit there. But I think there is probably a fit against Montreal's rival, the Boston Bruins. Now, Boston needs some depth on the wings as far as scoring. Obviously, there's lots to talk about the top line, and in general, their top 6 is good with Krejci and DeBrusk and Coyle. But that, Kovalchuk could play a third-line role and probably get them 15 goals. I think his style of game would fit the Boston system well and could potentially get another good year or 2 out of him. So I think Kovalchuk to Boston makes a lot of sense. I don't know if I personally want to see it, but it would make sense for both the team and the player in my opinion. And moving on to number 5, we have got Anthony Duclair going to the Detroit Red Wings. Now, obviously, Duclair's exit from Ottawa might not be something that lasts. He could return to the Ottawa Senators. Their GM Pierre Dorion did say that, the door is open. But after not qualifying them, I just can't see it happening. I think the Red Wings would be a good fit for Duclair because obviously the Red Wings need basically everything. Scoring, wingers, you name it. And Duclair does bring that. He can score you 20 goals. He is very talented, very fast. Obviously his defensive game is not the greatest at all. But he is a talented offensive player, and Detroit needs those right now. He wouldn't have any pressure there, and he would probably just be let loose to play however he felt like it. And I think that would be a good fit for him. Obviously, Detroit isn't going to be a winning team, so if he cares too much about winning, that's probably not the ideal landing spot for him. But I do think, not that he's a self-centered player, but he does probably want to work on his game and prove that he is worth whatever money he's asking for, and a 1-year deal in Detroit could be the spot for him to do it. Now, moving on to number 4, I have Travis Hamonic going to the Vancouver Canucks. Now, there was talks about Hamonic going to the Canucks before they did the Nate Schmidt trade, but I still think it makes sense for Vancouver because I look at their blue line and I still don't think they've improved enough. Getting Schmidt does help offset the loss of Tanev, and Schmidt is an upgrade, but they still have to deal with the loss of Troy Stecher. And I know there may be Canucks fans that say, oh, bring up Rafferty or bring up Juolevi, but there's no guarantee that those kids will be ready to play. I am of the mindset that Juolevi should probably play, but that would mean that Jamie Benn would still be in the top 6, or Jordy Benn, sorry. Jamie Benn would be a good top 6 there, but so Jordy Benn playing in the top 6, he's ideally maybe a 7th defenseman at this point. So I really think that signing Hamonic would be a good fit for Vancouver. He would be a good shutdown defensive defenseman. Does play a similar style to Chris Tanev, and Hamonic has stated that he wants to stay in the West and preferably Western Canada. So I do think that any one of the Western Canadian teams would be a good spot, and most likely Vancouver. At number 3, I have Sami Vatanen going to the Winnipeg Jets, which is why I'm wearing this jersey. But I think Vatanen to the Jets makes a lot of sense. Now, obviously, there is a strong Finnish presence in that locker room with guys like Laine and Ehlers, and Vatanen being a Finn, he'd probably feel more welcome there. But the Jets desperately need defense, and in my opinion, Vatanen is still probably the best defenseman on the market. They have a shutdown D-man in Dylan DeMello. Obviously, you can never have too many of them. But Vatanen can play the game in all ways. I think he's an underrated defenseman. He would fit well. He could play on the power play, the penalty kill, and probably slots in maybe right beside Josh Morrissey if they don't play Neil Pionk there. But either way, he would definitely be top 4 in Winnipeg, so he would get to play, and I think that would be a good fit for both the player and the team. Moving on to number 2, I have Mikael Granlund going to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, to me, this is a perfect fit. Granlund is a decent two-way forward that has kind of lost his scoring touch in Nashville, and Columbus moved out all of this money. They moved out Ryan Murray, Marcus Nudavara to bring in Mikko Koivu. I just feel like Columbus has more moves to be made. Now, they were linked to Taylor Hall and actually Alex Pietrangelo at some point, but GM Jarmo Kekalainen decided that it just wasn't in the best interest of the franchise. So they've got all this cap space, and obviously they do need to sign restricted free agent forward Pierre-Luc Dubois, but they can probably get him done on around $7 million per year, and they would still have enough space to get Granlund done on maybe a short-term deal. I think that would be a good fit, and they also need to offset the loss due to injury of Gustav Nyquist, because he's likely going to miss the entire year, and he is one of their better forwards. He is a top 6 guy for them, so they do need someone to replace that scoring, and I think Mikael Granlund would be a great fit. It's honestly surprising to me that he hasn't signed, because I don't think that his demands as far as money or term go would be unreasonable, and he is a very serviceable player in the NHL that does have 50 or 60 point upside, as we saw in Minnesota. Now, moving on to the final player on this list, and probably the undisputed top free agent available, I have Mike Hoffman, and I have him going to the Nashville Predators. Now, obviously, Nashville got Matt Duchene last year, which he has showed some chemistry with Mike Hoffman in their brief time in Ottawa, but that's not just why. Nashville is another team that cleared out cap space and really didn't sign much aside from some defensive depth pieces like Mark Borieski. Borokop, as Ottawa fans would know. Once again, they're a team that kind of leaves me wanting more in their offseason, and I feel like they do have another move to be made, and Mike Hoffman is probably the move. He has been linked there since the start of free agency. They're probably just negotiating on a better term or whatever. I mean, I don't think that there's actual negotiations going on right now, but they probably are sharing ideas, and in my opinion will probably come to an agreement sooner rather than later, now that arbitration deals are getting closed. But I could be super wrong, and Hoffman could sign in somewhere like New Jersey. That's another place I could see him going, but I think Nashville's the spot. They always need goal scoring because, even though they've got a lot of good forwards, they can never seem to be a top offensive team. They're always a more defensive team, and due in part to their roster. But I think Hoffman would bring a pure goal scorer and would likely fit very well on Duchene or Johansson's wing. But that does it for today's video. I thank you guys for watching till the end. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you guys later. Bye for now.